and the Down Beach Current were notified of this special meeting. A copy of same was posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Would you all please stand for the flag salute? Attention, salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tom, would you call the roll, please? Mr. Becker? Here. Mr. Blumberg? Here. Ms. Tardy? Here. Thank you. Before we begin, the fire marshal has advised me that we are at capacity. Would you all please check and see where the exits are, and please keep the exits clear. Thank you. We have with us tonight representatives of the DEP, representatives of the Corps of Engineers. We have William Dixon from the DEP. We have Dave Rosenblatt from the DEP. Where's Ben? Is Ben here? I'm sorry. Ben Kaiser from DEP. We have Keith Watson, Senior Project Manager from the Corps of Engineers, and Stephen Rochette, Legislative Aide from Affairs Office, also from that. Which of you gentlemen, Keith, are you going to start here? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Keith Watson from the Corps of Engineers.
Mayor and Commissioners, thank you for giving us the opportunity to come out and discuss some of the information and facts about the project that we're hoping to come and build in your town to help with storm damage reduction. My goal for coming tonight is to get out the information and the facts of the project and what it can do. I'm not here to advocate for the project. I can dispel any myths or rumors you've heard and just try to get the facts of what we're going to be doing here with our partners at the state. So I'm going to briefly give an overview of what the project entails and what the project's purpose is. The project here at Margate's one portion of the overall Absecon Island project, which includes the inlet on Absecon up in Atlantic City, as well as the beachfronts of Atlantic City, Ventnor, Margate, and Longport. Previously, we had completed the beach fills, the initial construction of the beach fills in Atlantic City and Ventnor. Those beach fills have actually been renourished once and repaired at least twice due to impacts from coastal storms. Now, the rest of the project that we're going to build in Margate and Longport will look very similar to Ventnor's project. So a dune that's constructed roughly 13 feet above the North American vertical datum, and a beach berm in front of that of approximately 125 feet. That beach fill will be pumped hydraulically using either hopper or hydraulic dredges from borrow areas offshore that have brought up the sand. It'll be the same sand you see being placed at Ventnor and in Atlantic City. So that sand will be brought, pumped up onto the shoreline, and a dune with a protective beach in front of it will be placed and formed. There will also be sand fencing at the toe of the dune, as well as public crossovers constructed at every current. Anywhere there's an access now, there'll be an access existing. And dune grass will be planted. So in a nutshell, that's what's going to happen as we move forward with the project here in Margate. So it'll look very similar to the parts of Ventnor that have a dune remaining.
Dave, you and Ben, you have?
Excuse me?
That's it, back off.
Back off? Back up. Back off. I'm Dave Rosenblatt. I'm the Director of Engineering and Construction in DEP. DEP and the state of New Jersey are the local sponsors of this project. Every Corps project requires a non-federal local sponsor, and that is us. What we do is enter into what we call a state aid agreement with the municipalities, and the municipalities actually are co-local sponsors with us as we proceed with projects. Our main role is to assist with the preparation of the project area. In other words, we are charged with getting easements where they're required, both from the municipality and the private property owners. And we review the technical specifications of the projects with the Corps. And as construction projects go, everybody's worked on a house. There's always small things that need to be considered as you go along. Some of the items that we have to consider during construction or just before construction are, what are we going to do with the stormwater outfalls that exist? What are we going to do with the existing jetties? There's always small things, and the Corps and the DEP work together to resolve those issues. That's it.
Thank you. Ben, do you?
Nothing right now.
Mayor, I'm sorry, there's so many people gathered over there. We have some stairs here if they want to
Sure.
come in and get more comfortable.
Absolutely. Would you people like to move from the exit? You can come up here along this wall and everything. Come on, Carol. Come on. We really have to clear the exits. It's a safety thing. Please move forward. Does anybody else have anything to present? Because these people have tons of questions. I don't
I think
know.
we're here mostly to answer the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the best help, I think.
Good. I like that. They're going right for questions.
That was it.
Question, Chairman.
Huh?
From the public or us?
From the public, right? Okay. All right. I have just informed our guests that you people have lots of questions, and they have agreed to start now to answer any questions that anyone might have. Please be brief, as we have a lot of people who want to speak.
Mayor, were the Army Corps of Engineers merely inept, incompetent, and inefficient, we might be able to write it off as just another bureaucratic boondoggle or snafu. However, the Corps has year after year, decade after decade, financially raped, robbed, and pillaged the American taxpayers. Everything the Corps touches turns to pure manure at enormous, exorbitant cost. Not hundreds of millions, but billions upon billions of dollars. Water Technology wrote, quote, Everglade restoration's cost balloons to $20 billion, end of quote. We are paying billions to facilitate eco-terrorism by the Corps. Patronage hacks should be indicted, tried, and sentenced to the Duluth FPC. Destroying natural...
John, do you have a question?
I have a comment, and you said they would take comments.
No, I said we would take questions. Questions, John.
I'll take 3 minutes of comment, Mayor.
You've already
I'm
had that,
asking,
John.
the question I'm asking, very simply,
Ask your question. These gentlemen have come here. We're to be polite. It's a question and answer period. Okay?
you said earlier it was comment, Mayor.
No, I did not say
Yes, you
comment.
did. I'll go back on the record and show you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? You forgot already.
Right, yeah.
But the bottom line is to allow this Corps of Army Engineers to come in here and basically be greased by the sand dredging companies that are going to get the replenishment contracts for the next 40 to 50 years is absurd and insane when they know...
John, sit.
What's your question? My question is question.
John, sit down. Sit down. John, sit down. Do you have a brief question?
I have a tough act to follow there. I have two questions. It seems like the Corps is against jetties. I don't know why. It seems like you're against jetties.
We are not against jetties per se. We've constructed many along the Jersey coast. A jetty, at Absecon Inlet, actually not a federal one, but Manasquan Inlet, Barnegat Inlet, Cape Manlet are the federal navigation projects which have jetties that we have constructed. So we are not adverse to constructing or building jetties.
In this case, item 10 says you rejected extending the Longport groin, but you're not really considering building any jetties instead of dunes along the coast.
As part of the feasibility study, we look at an overall picture of alternatives that are feasible to be constructed along a shoreline. Groins are one of those. Groins with beach fill is another option. Detached offshore breakwaters are also looked at. Now, they must be looked at and analyzed in the context of our regulations and the laws that we have to do projects. They were looked at, and they were found not to be the cost-effective authorized project. We are bound to recommend to Congress the project which maximizes the net benefits of the project. And our benefits are defined by storm damage reduction benefits over a 50-year period. So all the alternatives are looked at, and the plan that we must put forward is the one that maximizes those net benefits, cost versus damages saved.
I think that maybe you're referring to some of the regulations that don't take into account this island is already built up, and whether jetties are preferred or not preferred in other places, I think they might be a better solution, which is what I'm hearing as part of your answer.
We did look at them for this island. We absolutely considered that, and it was not the NED plan that was sent forward. Beach fill with periodic nourishment over the 50 years is the most cost-effective way to reduce damages for this specific island, not for other. Every study is done specifically for the area that we're building a project.
Okay. My other question is, if the project washes away in 1 year, are we going to be obligated to rebuild it every year for the next 40 or 50 years? If it theoretically washed away every year, we would have to maybe replace it 40 times if we accept the grant.
Yeah, I understand the question, yes. It's a good question, because as part of the partnership agreement we enter into with the state of New Jersey, there are two facets. One is the initial construction, which the beach gets built, constructed, and then as part of the ongoing construction, there's periodic nourishment that will come every 3 years to re-nourish the beach. And in large storms, as Sandy just exhibited, or there's a good example of that, we were back at Absecon pumping Atlantic City and Ventnor right after the storm to repair those beaches, which are now part of the federal project system. So they're twofold. So if it's a regular nourishment, yes, you're part of the cost-sharing project moving forward, but the flood control coastal emergency repairs are 100% federal. So the work you've seen going on now in Ventnor, well, you soon will see in Ventnor, but as it started in Atlantic City, is 100% federally funded.
So the city is responsible for periodic nourishment, but not a catastrophic event, emergency, as you term it.
Right. The project is cost-shared between the cost-sharing partners. The federal government pays 65% of the costs. The non-federal cost-sharing partner pays 35% of the costs, and that's the state of New Jersey. And then they, as Dave mentioned, they enter into agreements with each town, and the Corps is not party to those at all.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your efforts and the handouts. Thank you.
Would you make the point that there's no obligation if there's not federal or state funding from all your
I don't know if I'm the only one disappointed, but I thought I was going to hear more as to why you think the dunes are necessary on the beach, and tell me also about why you have not addressed the situation on the bay, since it seems when I go through the island that the damage to the homes and properties at the bay area is far more costly and far more devastating than it had been at the beach. So if you would address both of those issues, I would be really pleased. Thank you.
Linda, would you just state your name and address for the record?
Linda Gogler, 120 North Lancaster Avenue.
Who wants to take that one?
Okay. As I explained earlier, the project that, again, we were asked to look at and authorized to study was for coastal storm damage from the ocean. It's true that there are bay flooding issues on every island, every barrier island, but this particular project was looking at reducing the damages from the ocean waves, which increase the flooding as the waves run over the island. So this project specifically is to deal with the ocean inundation. And again, the project with the dunes is the project that is most cost-effective to prevent and reduce damages for Margate, Longport, and Ventnor, and Atlantic City as well.
The elevated dune beach system is designed to dissipate wave energy. It's, as we keep referring to, it's a coastal storm damage reduction project. It's not a flood project per se. Certainly, it will reduce some flooding, but the intent is to dissipate energy of the waves. Now, in the Back Bay, everybody knows there's flooding, particularly in the low-lying areas of Margate, Back Bay, Amherst Avenue. There is no plan on the books right now to address that flooding, other than to assist where possible, having homes elevated that need to be elevated, that were built way back when and are too low, particularly with the new base flood elevations that are out there, which require new building to meet those specifications. Getting a Corps project is a long process. It starts usually with a municipality and a state requesting through the Congress people that they're refunding, and the appropriations take a long time. This project was designed when, Keith, in the 80s?
It was, the final designs were in the 90s.
90s, okay.
But it started, there were many machinations and restarts of the project, probably from the 50s onward.
So with that in mind, I'll point out that the Corps is just not doing the projects on the books right now. The governor, the DEP, all want to see the entire coast with all the Corps projects that have been designed, have them constructed now. On the Back Bay, the Corps of Engineers is embarking on a regional comprehensive study that will be looking at all the states, all the areas that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy, and assess those places that have been left unprotected, assess the projects, potential conceptual projects that could alleviate some of the problems that we've experienced. That's a long way off to construction for those projects that are discovered or thought of during this process. But I'm telling you that the Corps of Engineers is thinking ahead as to what can be done in the future to alleviate some of the problems that were experienced on the barrier islands.
And I appreciate that point, Dave. The Corps doesn't come in and dictate the projects. We are asked to come in, and it has to be through the municipality to the state to the Congress to get us out to study and look at projects. There's a whole process, and we have a whole planning division that's looking at projects throughout the whole region, coastal, inland, flood control, as well as many other types of projects constantly. But we just don't come in and say, well, we're going to do a project here. We're asked and funded and have partners every step of the way. So it is a long, arduous process.
I also want to point out that Hurricane Sandy has created a pot of money from Congress that is really unprecedented in this area. In order for us to do all the Corps projects on the beaches from Sandy Hook to Cape May and then down around Raritan Bay and Delaware Bay shorelines, we have over $1 billion coming our way from Congress to do this work. it takes a tragedy for that amount of money to be allocated to a state. And this state intends to make use of that money to protect the citizens everywhere.
Mr. Berger?
My name is Ed Berger. I live at 9402 Amherst Avenue. I'm not an advocate of the project, but I appreciate you guys coming here tonight to answer our questions. And I have only a couple. The funding to fix the dunes if they're damaged during the periods when you're not doing a rebuilding project. That is something that this is a 40-year or 50-year project that we're 10 years into. If Congress decides 2 years from now to stop that funding, what happens to the city of Margate?
If there's no funding by one of the partners, the other partners are not obligated to fund.
So the city, so if the federal government or the state of New Jersey decided that this was not something that was part of their budget plans for the upcoming year, or that current administration decided not to do it, then the city of Margate is not obligated to maintain the dunes?
I'll jump in there real quick. The maintenance that everybody refers to, or the erosion of the dunes and or the erosion of the beach, Margate is responsible for general maintenance of the beach, which is what you do today. If you do beach raking today, you'll be do beach raking tomorrow. If there's a scarp on the beach, we would hope that Public Works or somebody would go out, a 2-3 foot scarp that happens at high tide, that gets knocked down. If a storm comes in and erodes out the dune between renourishment cycles, nobody expects Margate to come in and renourish that full dune again at its own expense. The Corps of Engineers looks at yearly gets money from Congress, but also they go out and they evaluate all the beaches up and down the whole coastline to see which ones are the most eroded, which ones need the most sand, and they report that back to Congress, and that is one of the ways that the money is doled out. Nobody expects Margate to come in with millions of dollars after the Corps finishes pumping and renourish the beaches. If there is a northeast storm that chews up the coast, if there is something like a Hurricane Irene or a Hurricane Sandy that comes through, hopefully the Corps of Engineers, and has in the past, obtains full 100% federal funding to repump the beaches.
So you understand that that's contrary to the information that we've received so far?
That's why I jumped in and brought that up, correct?
Yeah, because our understanding from all fronts previously had been that the only time that the federal government or the state would be providing any funding to replenish the dune should they be knocked down by a nor'easter would be, the every 3-year replenishment, and the city would be responsible for the balance of it. And you're telling me that that's categorically not true?
The renourishment cycle is what they try to hold to. If a storm comes in, just like, as I said, a Sandy or even an Irene in certain spots, we submit to the Corps a list of projects we feel that they need to go and inspect through PL 8499, and they come back and do the inspection and hopefully come back that, yes, there was enough damage, and they come in at 100%. As far as renourishment cycles, they try to stick to the regular renourishment cycle, but there has been municipalities that have been a little bit quicker on the renourishment cycle. There's been municipalities that have been pumped up in Monmouth County that weren't repumped until now at Hurricane Sandy because they did not need more sand.
I understand. A quick question about the easements, and then I think the gentleman from the DEP mentioned that there are easements required to do the dune projects here, and if the easements are not attained by the state or the city, what is the eventuality of the project? Is it dead, or what's the process?
We expect to get all the easements. We think that we can make a convincing argument between now and the time that they're absolutely needed, that we will get those easements. There's ongoing discussions in Trenton as to what will ultimately happen if that doesn't, hold up.
Okay.
And you mentioned Amherst Avenue from a flooding standpoint, and one of the other gentlemen did before that. If you noticed at the top, that's where I live. So from my perspective, I understand that the governor is trying to put dunes up and down the coast to protect the coast, but from my perspective as a homeowner in the city of Margate, without fully exploring the opportunity to secure the island, I'm looking at an opportunity to pay more taxes for an incomplete solution to a problem. And I think that my co-taxpayers who are opposed to this, and I don't necessarily think that the dunes are a bad thing, but I just don't think they're going to do us any good in Margate necessarily. I've seen in a lot of different cases where the dunes have actually become eyesores in shore communities. And I think that there's a potential for that happening here as well, depending on how they're maintained and depending on how much money it costs to do that. But, you know, from my perspective, again, an incomplete solution is no solution for us, and to ask the city to have to pay for additional through taxes, whether it is for, and there will be costs involved, you know, moving forward on it, is an incomplete solution, so.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that. Incomplete solution, yes, but when you have funding to deal with one part, the wave energies, and we don't have funding to deal with the flooding, should we not do that? Should we not take care of what we have funding for from Congress right now while the money's available? Because the money's not going to stick around forever. There's so much demand for federal money, particularly in the storm damage reduction business, that, you know, we have to get this going soon.
I think that's a question that gets answered two ways. The first is from someone who lives, who has you know, a home on the beachfront, who is looking for the dunes to hopefully knock down the waves for a short period of time, maybe, you know, or someone who lives on the bay like I do. Out of curiosity, and this is a question that came up earlier as well, and I hope I'm not monopolizing too much time, but, you know, in the event that there is another storm, you know, and Hurricane Sandy was a flooding event for us. I mean, there was serious waves, but I mean, it was a flooding event. It was not, you know, it was not Katrina, you know, it was a flooding event. You know, Hurricane Eric that's off the coast of Africa right now has probably got higher winds than would hit us in New Jersey. But the question to me is how long are those dunes going to keep back that wave action? What's it really going to accomplish if Margate is impacted by a serious storm?
You really can't predict, you know, how well they're going to hold up on any, you know, you can speculate that clearly where we had dunes up and down the coast, particularly in the areas where the storm hit hardest, where it was more than just a flooding event, it was actually a, you know, a wave energy event. The places that had dunes fared much better than places that didn't have dunes. I mean, that was pretty clear. Down here, it was a flooding event. It's not always going to be just a flooding event here. It's just not.
But everybody who lives on a barrier doesn't, you know,
Yes.
doesn't disagree with that. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
And from a protection standpoint also, the dune does contribute to lowering the ultimate water levels on the bay. And that was evident in all the areas that did get overwash and wave energy going down the beach. You can see it in the tide records on the back bays. So wherever there were breaches, there was a super elevation of the water level directly after those breaches occurred. It's overwashes in most cases, breaches like in Manahawkin, and that's a fact. And it does reduce flooding on low-frequency storms like Sandy. High-frequency flooding events, you're right, not much does it do for the Back Bay flooding, but on low-frequency means higher energy storms, it absolutely reduces the flooding elevation. And all you had to do is go to Long Beach Island or up on the next, you know, Manahawkin to the Barnegat Inlet Reach, and it's clear.
No, I did go up there, and I did see the damage that was up there. And I'm going to sit down. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know I've taken up enough of your time, but...
Thank you, Ed.
My name's Jerry Donahue, 8112 Ventnor Avenue. That's D-O-N-A-H-U-E. I just have a couple questions for information for my own purpose. I realize what you're going to tackle with barrier islands is very difficult because Mother Nature keeps on changing these islands and you want to keep them the way they are. So you have a fight on your hands. It's going to be one thing. But one question I have, when you replenish the beach and you pump the sand, groins have always been a problem, haven't they? Don't they groins? Groins, don't they hasten the erosion?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Well-designed and well-placed groins actually help to retain sand in areas that have a healthy littoral transport, in other words, sediment coming to the groin cells. Areas where you don't have that, they begin to start to accelerate erosion.
So these would be covered more than likely?
That's correct.
Okay. Atlantic City, years ago, when they were building their dunes, implemented what was called geotubes. Would you be doing that?
There are currently no plans to have geotubes in the dunes.
They're not effective, you think, or what?
The geotubes actually, once they get exposed, increase the erosion in front of them during large coastal storms.
Okay.
And they tend to fail more readily.
And break, I guess.
And
yeah,
break.
okay. I know years ago, Stevens Institute with Dr. Michael Bruno was experimenting with concrete artificial reefs in Sea Isle and Cape May. Are they any benefit in the future?
In certain situations, they can provide benefit to shorelines, usually in lower energy atmospheres, or environments. Those options were looked at as potential solutions to the storm damage reduction on this island, and they were not the plans that came out as reducing the damages the most for the amount of money spent.
Okay.
So we have to balance that. We're required to balance the two.
Yeah, okay, all right. And the start date is anticipated to be when?
At this time, we do not have a hard and fast start date. We are, the Sandy Relief Bill was signed in January. The funding and the go-ahead to begin to fulfill the requirements of that law, were put out at the end of May. We have begun, in that bill is required a number of reports, one of which Dave outlined, as well as a relook at each one of the projects for sustainability and compatibility with the environment, and a number of other issues that were under review. So these reports must be completed, approved, and then a new partnership agreement with the state needs to be developed and signed. These are actions that are up at our headquarters and the Assistant Secretary of Army's level. So once those are done, then we get those approvals, we can move forward. We expect that that will all happen. It's just a matter of time.
How rapidly, like October?
I believe, I would hope that if all goes well...
Best scenario, October?
No.
No?
No. Best scenario would be having your beaches pumped by next summer.
Well, next summer?
Yeah,
Okay.
by the spring or summer.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Art Cotilli, 114 North Lancaster Avenue. It seems that the choice now is dunes or not. And I'm annoyed with that a little bit because I just don't think that that's the save-all. I know you did say you looked at quite a few other things. But I was taking a look at just increasing the bulkheads. You mentioned that bulkheads, well, the dunes are going to be 13 feet high, and it's going to be the same as Ventnor and Atlantic City in appearance. And I say it's not, because Ventnor and Atlantic City both have boardwalks, and you'll be walking along the boardwalk automatically looking over the dunes, which you will not do now. We don't have a boardwalk. Now, I think that maybe a good look at bulkhead increase to 13 feet might be something to do, and in addition, they're not going to wash away. They'll never need maintenance. I mean, the bulkhead increased already at my street on Lancaster Avenue, and it increased by 2 feet. I don't know who put that in, but it looks pretty sturdy to me, and I think that'll last as long as the original dunes were there. And you won't need any water outflow pipes. You just have holes in the bottom, and no matter how much rain rains behind it, it will flow out on the beach like it normally does. These dunes, it sounds like something we all did when we were kids. Put up dunes, the whole smaller dunes, but we'll hold the water back. And that water just is not going to be held back. It's going to want to change the appearance of the island. And by putting dunes, you will change the appearance of this island really quickly and very soon. So I just ask, could that also be looked at? Is there funding, the funding that you're getting, will that cover increased height of bulkheads? It seems like it's going to do a similar thing so that the money should be used for abatement of these storms. Has that been looked at? Increasing the bulkheads to 13 feet?
Again, the project is to reduce storm damages over the 50 years, and we must go with the authorized plan. And that plan was studied. The options that you talked about were looked at in that plan and were not found to be the cost-effective solutions for the federal government's to come in to assist the town to build a storm damage reduction project. I'm not saying that the bulkhead will or won't work. It's just not the federally authorized plan. The federally authorized plan, which we are bound to construct, and which we are funded and authorized for, is a dune and berm. So
It sounds like the dunes are going to be a continuous effort.
it is a continuing construction program over 50 years. Yes, sir.
Right, whereas a bulkhead would be a one-time layout. I think you'd save quite a bit of money, and you'd have a lot more people being interested in that. Now you're going to have to put a ladder or something to get over the dunes?
I don't mean to cut you short, but there's a lot of people that have questions, and that is a very valid question, and bulkheads absolutely are a valid solution for coastal storm damage protection, but we are not allowed to build them with the federal project. One thing we did bring is information that talks about how we got here and how the federal process works, and there's a pamphlet on that table right there, and we'll post it on our website as well, on how beach fill works and how the federal process got us to this point. We've been studying, like I said, this particular project first started getting studied in the early 90s and was finalized at the end of the 90s and authorized by Congress in 2000. The partnership agreement was signed with the state in 2004, and that's when the initial construction was begun in Atlantic City. So the project is actually ongoing. And so that information will explain to you and everyone else that wants to get more into the details of why we're here and why the authorized project is what it is. But that's what we have. And so we're coming to saying we are willing to participate, and we are participating with the state of New Jersey to build this storm damage protection for the town.
One last question. I noticed all our beach block streets had sand damage. And I was just wondering, if you build a sand dune, will the wind that we had, straight line winds or whatever, are they now going to blow from the top of across the top of the dunes? I know when it's very windy on the beach, you'll see the sand blowing along the beach. Now you've raised it to the height above your bulkhead. So now the wind will blow it more into the streets, I would think. Is that true or not? Or aren't we creating a pile of sand?
The dune will
to
actually
blow
probably
away?
help to cause a void in the flow, a vortex in the flow, and it will actually help sand drop out. There's also dune grass that's planted, so on the back side of the dune or growing the dune with sand fencing out in front to stop that sand. So there are measures employed to reduce sand blowing landward to be trapped the dunes. That's why natural dunes occur. Aeolian transport is what creates the dunes. Overwash and then the sand blowing in the wind getting collected in the plants and trees and bushes, and that's what grows a natural dune. So that's a nourishment, natural nourishment of the dunes that will help fortify them over the years.
I just want to
I have to cut you short. We have a lot of people waiting.
I'm just going to say thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Art.
I just want to add one item to this. Bulkheads can be whatever height, and some places the higher the better, obviously. But one of the things that we have to assure is that we have sand in front of those bulkheads, because if water reaches the bulkheads on a routine basis, it just hastens the erosion. The waves reflect off the hard structure and push the sand offshore. So taking advantage of this money and the Corps' plans to put as much sand on this island as possible is a really good thing.
Thank you.
Carol Lorman, 4 Dolphin Drive. I have a couple of questions. Into the mic? Okay. Number one, what was the percentage of damage from the monetarily and just physical damage from the ocean front, the first beach block, and the rest of the island, the bay? Because I have doubts that the dune will protect anybody past the first block. I just can't see how the dune will protect anything past the beach block houses. And what was the percentage of damage on this island?
Yeah, we don't have percentages here, but I would say to you, take a good look at the pictures of Mantoloking.
Of what?
Mantaloking.
We're not in Manaloka.
No,
Our island is positioned differently.
No, we are not building this for Sandy. We're building this for the next one, and the next one after that.
I've lived here forever, and we've had many storms, and our island is, I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but most of the islands are running north and south. They get a different wave flow, and during a storm. And this was the first storm that has come in the way it did. And I am just asking you, what guarantee do we have that if we get a northeaster and our island does not run north and south, will these dunes protect us from a northeaster?
Sure. Yes.
How about in Florida? There are no dunes in many of those Florida and in Georgia and in South Carolina, and the sand is still there. It's eroding. Longport now has more sand than ever. I've walked on these beaches for 65 years. Longport has more sand than it ever had before. Bigger beaches, they had narrow little beaches when I was a kid. All the sand has come down from Atlantic City and Ventnor. And after Sandy, Margate's beaches are actually fine. We're perfect. We're perfect.
Yeah,
We certainly would be having a different conversation if Sandy had turned 20 miles south.
What was that?
If Sandy had turned earlier?
It didn't.
Absolutely, but can you tell me the next one's not?
Well, are we going to plan for 200 years from now? Are we going to put our grandchildren in debt for the next 50, 100 years to maintain these dunes, in the hopes that maybe we will get a hurricane that's going to come directly in at the right moment, at the right time, at the right moon phase, because it all worked. The moon was full, everything was against us, and we're still here. This island is still here.
Thank you. Carol, we have a lot of people waiting. Could we limit this to questions, please? These folks are here to answer questions and not comments.
Mayor, I thank you for giving me that guidance. I have a lot of questions. My name is Dan Gottlieb. I live at 407 North Nassau Avenue in Margate. I also represent a citizens educational group. We're trying to help the people in Margate make the best decision based on all the options that are available to us. And I appreciate you guys coming down to help us vet all those options. I grew up on a beach block street. I grew up one house off the ocean. I lived there until I moved out of my parents' home, and the home stayed in the family for 60 years, and I'm almost that age, so you can get an idea of how long I've had some living on the beach block. And I stayed for Sandy. I know I wasn't supposed to, and I hope the police don't come and get me, but I went down to the beach to help some of my neighbors right after the storm. There'll be a series of questions.
Dan?
So anyway, I have this citizens educational group that I represent. We have formed a lot of questions, and I hope because I represent more than one person, I represent a group, you'll allow me to answer a few questions if I ask them quickly and briefly. Have you vetted all the other options? You said that you have studies that show your solution is the best. Where can those studies be found? Okay, thank you. This is the full study on why...
references the study, sir.
Specifically, does it discuss specifically...
Should I answer or should I wait?
Yes, please. Okay. I thought he answered.
Right. No. Okay. I'd be happy to. We do feasibility studies, and that study took over 4 years to complete and was vetted through our partners and all the representatives at the time and through the engineering and science community. And again, the plan we must recommend is the plan that is the net economic development plan based on the Corps of Engineers and the federal government's laws and regulations. It may not be the absolute solution, but it's the one we have to go with based on federal interest, and that's why the federal government is here participating, and 65-35 is the cost share. However, the Sandy relief bill, it's 100% federally funded, the authorized solution. The federal government is paying 100% of the initial construction of this project. I'm not sure if that information was out there or not.
In the interest of time, since I've been told I can't make any commentary, I would just like to rattle off as briefly as I can some questions. From 2004 to 2011, nothing was done to maintain the shore protection plan template. Why? In that time, large sections of the project eroded completely and were left in a state of disrepair until the fall of 2011. Was this because no funding was available from Congress or the state of New Jersey?
The portions of the project that were constructed were the communities that signed on with the state to participate in the federal project at that time. The initial funding was there for this island to build the entire island at the time. However, only the areas that were participating in the project with the state were constructed at that time. That would be the beach fill in Atlantic City and Ventnor.
Drainage, how do you propose to drain the area behind the levee?
The current drainage will not be affected by the project. The way your streets drain today, they will drain the same way after the project is completed. We will work with the engineering team of Margate to ensure that there's no effect from our project on the drainage at the street ends.
Water will be trapped behind the dune, though, with contaminants and...
The dune will not trap any more water behind it than already lays on your beaches. As long as that water perks out, it'll perk out the same way before and after.
What's the cost sharing for that, for the drainage?
Cost sharing for
the drainage
for the maintenance that you currently do on your street ends and the sand to get this sand to perk? I turn to the local municipality. There is none.
Can I just ask or add in? I think I know where you're going, Dan. The project is 100% federally funded for the beach nourishment and the sand dunes, but I think the outfall pipes and the engineering cost associated with, I think Margate pays 25%. So would that be?
I'll address that one. There's 4 outfalls in Margate that were noted on the beginning plans. Those 4 outfalls will be extended at the worst case scenario will be 75% state, 25% Margate. The Corps of Engineers is waiting for that supplemental PCA to the project itself. There is what is known as credit to the project for lands, relocations, outfall extensions, etc. Once that PCA comes out, there is a great possibility that that could be funded or credited back to the project, one or the other, at 100% federal cost. To the best of our knowledge, that is the only funds that Margate would possibly have to pay. We have to wait until that PCA amendment comes out.
There would be other costs with renourishment and also costs with easements.
And any easements, again, is in the same situation as the outfalls. If the Corps of Engineers amended PCA comes, that LERD credit in the past, and I'm not saying now, but in the past for projects, if they follow the Corps regulations, has been paid for or credited back by the Corps of Engineers. And as far as renourishments, one thing that hasn't come out yet is Margate today is only signing on for this first project, for the initial nourishment, not for the renourishments. On renourishments, if Margate so chooses and there is no storm event, that renourishment would be paid at a 65% cost by the federal government, a 35% cost by the non-federal sponsor, and the state of New Jersey picks up 75%. To clear through the math, basically Margate would be responsible for 8.75% of the project itself. And this state aid agreement is just for the initial renourishment. It does not commit Margate to future renourishments.
What happens if the funding runs out at the state or federal level and now we have a 35 or 40 foot wide berm? What happens on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock at high tide when we have a 40 foot berm the beach replenishment, the renourishment gets washed down to Wildwood on the first nor'easter, like we've seen in Atlantic City and Ventnor, and all we have left in the middle of our beach is a giant berm. Do you folks take into any consideration the recreational aspect of the usage of our beaches, or are you just here for protection, which I'm not arguing against protection, I just need to know the answer to that.
Well, on the recreational portion, the state is here to provide shore protection, but it is very cognizant of the fact of recreational activities going on the beach front, and so is the Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers is there to provide shore protection, but again, they are also very cognizant of recreational activities going on the beach.
But if the funding formula changes, then...
The reason for the change in the PPA, which they're now called Project Participation Agreements, they used to be called Project Cooperation Agreements, is the fact that the Sandy Relief Bill is funding 100% of the initial construction. That is the reason. So the 35% that the non-federal sponsor was going to have to pay for the most expensive portion of the project is no longer there. It's being paid for 100% by the federal government. So that's just one fact for everyone to digest. And once the sand is added to the beach, that sand is yours. No one's coming to take the sand back. So as the beach gets larger, there's more sand there for recreation after the fact, whether you continue with the project or not into the future.
And regarding recreation, the fishing pier, it was my understanding that that also could be paid for out of the LEARN credit, too.
Okay, the mayor has limited me and my group to one more question, so I will try to get to the one that I think is most important to me or to my group. Would you say that it's true that the focus and emphasis of the state and federal government is mainly directed at protecting a tiny minority of the homes, which many of those homeowners are opposed to the project from my polling? Many of those homes along the shorefront, as opposed to the great majority of people's homes in these areas. That, in fact, these projects amount to little more than a subsidy for a few that everyone else has to support through taxes.
No. That's a simple answer. No, the project's for the entire community. It isn't just for any particular homeowner or taxpayer or individual. The project is for the entire community, to protect the entire community from events like Sandy or larger or the more frequent northeasters.
Mayor, if I could, I'd just like to make one comment before I walk away. It'll take 15 seconds, 10 seconds.
Go ahead,
Wouldn't Margate be better off just taking all this money, or a fraction of this money, and investing it to reinforce our bulkheads, which Surf City doesn't have, and they were in the editorial of the press today. Just reinforce our bulkheads and save some money. Thank you.
But that's a different topic. The project is for Beachville.
Joe's attorney, 312 North Union Avenue, Margate. Before I don't know whether I spoke to any of you gentlemen 10 years ago at the Eugene High School. But anyhow, before I go on, I've been born and raised on the island, to be exact, 4 days. And I was a lifeguard in 1941. And I lived through the hurricane of 44 and worked through it. I want to ask you gentlemen a question. Are any of you familiar with the master jetty on the south end of Brigantine? Any of you?
Yes.
Yes. Do you have any idea how long that jetty is? It was built in the early 50s, by the way. I watched it being built. But I lived on Main Avenue, Atlantic City.
3 segments.
It's approximately a mile long, okay? Before that jetty was built, it was impossible to even think about building homes on the south end of Brigantine. When that jetty was built, by the way, there are now homes. And over a 3,000-foot beach. These people wouldn't be here for the fact if we had something similar to that on the south end of Longport. I might add, this evening I spoke to Denny Levinson over the air, and he is 1,000% for it. A master jetty on south end of Longport. I might add, during the intermission, the last meeting, I cornered one of you gentlemen, and he went on to tell me He says, you know, that wasn't built to build up the sand to bring a team. That was for navigation purposes, because there were tankers going up the Absecon Inlet. I might add, just recently in a newspaper, the press, there were a lot of people in Ocean City, including Sonny McCullough. He called me yesterday. He's very much interested in a master jetty because it would keep the sand out of the Great Egg Harbor Inlet, because people are complaining about their docks are landlocked. The fact of the matter is we live on the most expensive and most valuable island on the eastern seaboard, and yet you folks are not paying attention. It's not a political problem, it's a serious problem, because if we get a hurricane like the 44, like I explained earlier this evening to the mayor, I worked the hurricane in 44. I worked for a jukebox outfit in 44. In any case, we had a route going down Avalon, Seattle City, to Cape Bay. And I got news for you, on the south side, on the ocean side of the...
Do you have a question?
Yes, I would like to know, as soon as I to tell them that right off the bat, we get a hurricane like in 44, those dunes will be washed out, including, in fact, Tom Foley, who's in charge of the emergency management of Atlantic City, who was a lifeguard, said the same thing. The fact of the matter is, I can only say that I wouldn't want you, for these people wouldn't be here if your master jetty was built. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Stephen Altman, 9003 Amherst Avenue, Margate. I'll be brief. If Margate chooses not to participate in this program, will this affect our FEMA insurance across the island?
I do not know the direct answer to that. I do not, I don't speak for FEMA.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
But you will certainly, the V-zones could be higher, the way they compute the V-zones, but that means the elevations will be higher, and I think that directly goes to rates, but I do not know the direct answer to your question.
Thank you. There are, I believe, a dozen properties in Margate that have riparian rights. If a number or as few as one of those properties chooses not to give a waiver, does that stop this entire project and make this evening's discussion moot?
I explained before, those options are being discussed in Trenton. What will we do if people don't voluntarily sign on? And I'm not prepared to say, nobody's prepared to say at this moment what will happen.
I mean, but it could actually stop the whole project if you had one property. It could, okay. So the answer is yes. Yes?
No, I'm anticipating that we're going to get all the easements.
I'm sorry?
I'm anticipating that we will get all the easements and we'll be able to proceed.
Okay. I am an opponent to our city's beach block parking restrictions, and the dunes tend to protect the beach block. Is that not true?
Again, the dunes assist protecting the entire community, and they do reduce flooding over the entire community for increasing energy event. Larger events, they'll lower the flooding across the whole community, not just the ocean block.
A follow-up to that, does the state or federal government encourage local communities to improve access to the beach by eliminating things or altering things like beach block parking restrictions?
The Corps of Engineers in their feasibility analysis determined that for their purposes there was sufficient parking in Margate, and the state accepts that analysis in Margate. And there's plenty of public access. I mean, Margate, Ventnor, Atlantic City, they all have really good public access to the beaches.
I understand that Ventnor has an agreement that includes eliminating beach block parking. Is that true?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge.
I never heard that.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Steve.
My name is Captain Joe Fogel. I'm here with the United States Merchant Marine Service, and I'm also a representative of the Water Watch International as president. I'm representing the Explorers Club as chairman of Environmental Protection. I'm also here as a member of the Atlantic County Community and the Atlantic County Utilities Authority Groundwater Assessment Committee. I'm also representing as chairman of Ecotourism, the New Jersey Tourism Council mandated by the governor. I have one question. If you do put the dunes down, would anybody be allowed to make any changes to these dunes? I know that, is it possible to sit on the dunes, walk on the dunes, or change the dunes in any way?
Well, no. The municipalities are to have, or most municipalities have dune ordinances when they have dunes that don't allow people on the dune. The state discourages people from going on dunes or altering dunes. Certainly there's CAFA regulations that limit what can be built on dunes, but as far as people going on the dune, that's a local issue that has to be enforced locally.
And will the municipality of Margate be allowed to make any changes to the dunes if they feel they need to have right-of-way or cut an access or do something that the community needs?
Well, once you cut an access way through a dune, you've created an access way for the next storm. So we have walkovers on the dunes.
Walkovers, okay. And the last question is, what is the actual size in terms of width of the dune?
The dune is at elevation 12.75. If you're standing on the beach is at 7.25, which is a total of 5 feet. It has 5 foot, 1-on-5 side slopes on each side, and a 25-foot crest width, berm width on the top of the dune. That comes to a total of 75 feet.
Okay, we're talking now width from the street side.
From the toe of the dune on the street side to the toe of the dune on the water side is a total of 75 feet. 5-on-1, 5-on-1, 25, 5 foot up from the beach side.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming this evening and providing this information and answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeff Rutizer. I'm on the board of directors at the Margate Fishing Pier at 121 South Exeter. And some of the questions I had, I know you said you believe everybody would sign the easements, but and you said you're concerned about recreation on the beaches. We're strictly a fishing club, and by doing that, it would basically eliminate our use. We have very shallow water right now in front of the pier, and that would pretty much eliminate it. So what do you propose for that?
From the state's perspective, I'd like to say that the state and Army Corps would like to meet with the Board of Commissioners for the pier itself, along with the mayor or a council person, to discuss this option of what's going to go on with the Margate Fishing Pier.
Okay.
I'll echo that.
Okay, that's fine, because it would also the dunes going under the pier or next to the pier would be another issue also. So I guess
we look at that at all the piers. We had to deal with that same issue in Atlantic City. With all the piers through Atlantic City, Ventnor Fishing Pier, and so with each project, depends on the type of ownership, riparian grants, and all that needs to be worked out. That's why it would be best for us to sit down and talk with you specifically about that, because the beach berm will be pushed out significantly in that area.
After the meeting, come up and either get my phone number or Keith's phone number, and we'll set up an appointment with your full Board of Commissioners.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Evening, Stan Silverman, 108 South Douglas, Beach Block, Third House Inn. I just want to confirm something that you said that I think I heard you say, that if the storm would have passed 50 miles to the south of us, the dune system you're proposing would in fact protect the city. Is that correct? Because the storm passed actually over Margate.
it would help reduce damages from the storms. In other words, if the storm had gone, I believe I said 20 miles south, 20,
Okay.
we can split hairs on it. But the most devastating part of that storm, winds, water levels, with the waves, ran through the stretch between Bay Head and Seaside Park. And then
So you feel...
Long Beach Island was the next area that took the hit. Here was relatively much lower.
Do you feel from an engineering point of view that 12.75 feet is sufficient and it shouldn't be 13.15 or some other number, and 75 feet wide is sufficient and it shouldn't be 86? Your engineers have looked at that and you're telling us that that's the right size for our city?
It's the size that comes out of the analysis we are bound to do, to look at over the 50 years, the reduction in damages over a 50-year period from all potential storms that can occur. It's a very complicated. It's not built to protect from protect, in other words, no damages.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
Okay. One last comment. You said that, I think it was you that said that the streets would drain the way they are now. Was that you, or was that one of the
that was me.
Yeah, okay. Douglas Avenue, the street is 2 feet below the sand, 2.5 feet below the sand. The way the street drains is that 3-4 times a year, the city takes a bulldozer and cuts a trench from the scuppers to the ocean. The only way the street will drain is if this trench is maintained, and the guys do a pretty good job maintaining it. Even when we have to call them, they come right out and they do it. So the neighbors have a relationship with Public Works. That works, Brenda. You can't build a dune without coming up with an engineering solution for draining Douglas Avenue, and maybe there's more than one street like Douglas, but Douglas will not drain unless you have an engineering solution, because you can't cut a trench through the dune.
Yeah, and as Dave said, in every one of our projects, there's certain little things that you can't foresee unless you get there and do the detailed analysis. And that's why we'll work with the engineering department at Margate to come up with the best solution for the town that we would incorporate into the plan within the limits of what we can do.
Well, Ed Wilberg is well aware of the problem. Everybody's aware of the problem. I just want to leave on record, and I want it written down, that Douglas Avenue needs to have an engineering solution, because the street will not drain unless you cut a trench. That's what's done now. Because the street is 2 feet below the sand, maybe 2.5.
And that's where the local community comes in with the partnership with the state to work out issues like that for that specific area or in other specific areas. We can't foresee all those problems ahead of time. We look at the entire island, but when we come to your town, that's when we focus in on the specific issues like the fishing pier, Douglas Avenue, extending the outfalls. That stuff gets...
So now you're aware of it, thank you.
Correct. No, I'm sure the town was going to make us aware of it.
I told Mike last time, so he's aware of it too. Gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. It's been very informative, and you've answered a lot of my questions from previous speakers, so I don't have to ask, so I give my time up to the next speaker.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Larry Siegel. I have two short questions. How far from the bulkhead to the dune will it be? How much space will be between the bulkhead and the dunes?
That's one of the issues we're working out with the engineers, and that has to do with how each street end drains.
So my understanding then, the dunes are going to follow the contour of the bulkheads, is that correct?
To a point. They can't follow, they will not, there won't be right turns, there's not going to be 90 degrees, so it'll be a smooth transition. The dune is more effective the further away from the shoreline it is. So the further back, as far back as we can get it, within reason, to work with the town and for drainage issues, et cetera, and crossovers and all those things, that's where the dune's going to end up being placed.
I just have concerns about when normal rainstorms come, water sits between the dune and the bulkhead, the breeding of mosquitoes and flies, those kinds of concerns.
Yeah, and as I discussed with the town at a previous meeting, that happens now, I'm told. Sometimes it ponds now, so that condition isn't going to be changed. So we'll leave room, we'll work with the town. If there's ways that we can engineer something with them or a maintenance issue, that's something that can be worked out in the plan.
The last question is regarding the DEP. What is the rule for ADA handicap accessibility to beaches? Now, my understanding is that there's only going to be every 4 blocks handicap accessibility to beaches. Is the ADA pertain to this or not? I'm not sure. I know it pertains to, these are public areas. Would you please explain that to me?
On every project that we do, we maintain ADA handicap accessible walkovers. We try to maintain exactly what's in place. If there is none in the town, we do provide one in every town, at least, depending upon the length of the town. We'll work with the town. I personally don't know exactly which street ends right now are ADA and which ones are not. That's a question that we'll work with the engineering department, and the Corps of Engineers will institute handicap access within the municipality.
My understanding is if someone lives on a beach block or street that's not handicapped accessible, that they could request the city to make it handicap accessible. Is that correct?
I'm unaware of that.
That was my interpretation, since it's a public access. I think it's unfair that we have a city where we have a lot of elderly people that have disabilities, that we only have a few blocks that maintain accessibility to the beach. Thank you.
Where's Wahlberg?
David Nathanson, 104 North Clarendon Avenue. 15. In the event that there is another storm, superstorm, hurricane, if we do not accept the proposal to build the dunes, will FEMA have an opportunity to say at the next hurricane, you've had your chance, the funding may not be there to help restore the town, as they have up and down the coast? Or is that a moot?
I'm going to apologize. I don't know what FEMA's rules are on that exactly. We do not, contrary to what everybody thinks, we do not work with FEMA directly. Okay. And they may be, because of storms like Sandy and Katrina, be crafting new rules, new ways they do their flood insurance. I know that program is changing. Right. I do not know the details of that, though.
So, okay. And the other thing is, I'd like to say, there was a woman who commented that she doesn't want to leave her children and grandchildren in debt. And I just want to say, and I know it's not for comments, but I would rather leave them, if there is any debt, with something, a little bit of debt, than not have an island here. So.
Hi, I'm Seth Lear. I live at 109 South Argyle. A few questions. I'm not sure what 13 feet means. If, for example, you happen to live in an area that, let's say, is 10 feet, does that mean the dune will be 3 feet above the 10 feet? Is that what 13 feet means?
It depends on what datum plane you're using. If you're using the new datum plane at NAVD 88, which most surveys are now using, yes, that does. But there's different datum planes, 10, 13, I don't know what datum plane your 10 is in.
Was recently published showed different flood zones and different heights, 4 feet or 6 feet or 8 feet or 10 feet. Yeah. Using that, is that what it would mean, that you're 3 feet above that level?
That, I believe all the FEMA maps are in NAVD 88, but I don't want to comment.
I believe they are in NAVD 88, but that's a base flood level. That's not what the ground is. That's how high a water in their simulated, whatever they're considering a 100-year event is.
So how do we translate what 13 feet means to where you live?
It's close to it.
We provided the municipality a map that identifies the bulkhead elevation at every street end and also provides the elevation of every existing dune within Margate. So people like you who are curious as to how high is this dune going to be in front of my house, we'll give you the elevation of the bulkhead and the dune nearest you, and you can extrapolate from that how many feet above that elevation the dune will be.
Sir, if I can interrupt, our municipal engineer, Mr. Wahlberg, will answer your question.
Just to give you a point of reference, the bulkhead at the end of your street is at elevation 11.7. The dune, 12.7. So the dune would be approximately 1 foot higher than the top of the bulkhead at the end of your street.
Great. You also said it's approximately 13 feet. Could it be 14 feet?
No, he said approximately.
I said that 12.75 is approximately.
So it won't go above that?
It will not be constructed above that, no.
also talked about what the city's obligations would be for ongoing maintenance, that 35% on an ongoing basis. What does that mean dollar-wise? How many dollars a year would you estimate it's going to cost to maintain the dunes?
And we've spoken together about this a bunch and spoken to other municipalities. The maintenance that we foresee, the municipality, and again, each municipality is separate and does their own separate things. There might be, and I don't know your specific in Margate what you do, there might be an extra hour of beach raking total because they have to do 3 or 4 more passes because the beach is a little wider. There might be, and in my town, most of the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts do that. There might be fortification of the dunes with dune grass over the years.
Are you asking, when we come back and do replenishments?
Yes.
What is going to be the cost of the town?
The real dollars, not the little dollars.
Okay.
All right, but when you said maintenance, we were thinking...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's 8.75 cents on the dollar. We can't predict the bid rates in the future, but on a renourishment of $10 million, it's $875,000. Renourishment rate might be a lot lower than that, depending upon how much material is needed, and how much sand is needed in the future.
Are you all working with an annual estimate that we would understand and could share with us? And what that might mean relative to taxes?
There are estimates that are out there. They're changing. I mentioned the reports that are being done. One of the reports that is required is a limited reevaluation report of exactly what you're asking. That's ongoing. So we do not have that exact number, but the feasibility study has the old estimates based on the 1996 price level.
Well, we can get that number.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
We will have that information.
And that'll all be published on the website or easily accessible?
We are in information-seeking mode here.
Great. I am too. That's perfect.
When Ventnor was first built, it cost the city about $875,000. So, Ventnor Margate.
And a couple additional questions. So, for example, the dunes that are by Brunswick, which are very, very high, are higher than the height that's being contemplated. Because that blocks out the whole first level of most of the homes there.
What street was that? What street was that?
Brunswick. Not my street, but I just happen to know the dune.
You're talking about the existing dune that's there? Blocks?
Yes.
Yeah. The highest elevation of that dune is over elevation 17.
Okay. Last thing is if the views are blocked, if you happen to be on Beach Block, will the height restrictions of the township be raised so that if you choose to raise your house, you can raise your house?
Entirely separate issue.
I don't think it is. It's the same issue, particularly when you're asking for an easement. It's the issue.
I don't have an answer for that at this point.
So that's a question that deserves an answer. And the last thing would be funding that might be available, because I know the federal government has made funding available for other homes to be raised where they've been flooded. So will there be funding available for that?
I don't have that answer. I have to be honest with you.
Okay. I threw out a number for what the original Ventnor project cost. That was starting from scratch. It hadn't been replenished before. This project will be free to Margate and will create a nice base for you so that if when the Corps comes back to do a replenishment, you will have much more sand in place already, most likely. So they won't have to add as much sand.
That's accurate.
I'm neither for it nor against it. I just don't understand it yet.
But the last two questions you asked are local questions.
And that's why we're here. There's a lot of us at the same position.
So ultimately, the process of trying to seek approval is to provide all this information so that people knows.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ann Pancoast, I was going to say we're saving the best for last, but this guy came up behind me, so I can't say that. I have two questions. First one, Ventnor had no sand during Sandy on their beach blocks. Would you attribute that to the fact that they had sand dunes? Margate had, I'd say, tons of sand on every beach block.
I would like to say that, but I don't know that. I don't know, there's so many variables that determine where sand goes during a storm. Certainly, I think they do play a part generally.
Okay.
And there aren't other areas of the shore where there were dune projects right next to no dune projects. It was Stark, where there were dune projects, virtually no sand, no damages to any of the homes all the way across the island. Where there were no dunes or very small dunes, there were 3-4 feet of sand across the roads and catastrophic damage in many of the areas. Right next to it, Long Beach Island is the perfect example of that. If you go to the areas in Brant Beach, in Long Beach Township, where the dune was, 2 blocks south of that, and for the next mile or two, it was an unfortunate experiment was conducted, but our design, behind the design, very little sand or damage. Where there wasn't dunes, extreme damage and lots of debris cleanup.
It was my understanding of Ventnor, my conversations with Ventnor, they did not receive the amount of sand in the streets that they anticipated or would have had without the dune. That's what I was told.
My other question is, at what time do you need commitment from Margate to enter the shore project? Is there a time frame when we must enter?
Oh, boy. You know, so much depends on the course schedule. We sort of, when they work out a schedule that says they're ready to go out to bid advertisement next spring, we work backwards from that and say, now we have to have everything in place so we can confidently move forward. So, you know, we're pressing all the towns now to step up and sign on, and all the private property owners to sign those easements and get them to us right now, because these months are going by quickly. And so the answer is now, or ASAP.
Yeah,
Thank you very
and without
much.
them, the project can't get funded for this portion unless we are confident we have all the easements in the area to do the project. That's one of the requirements of the Sandy Relief Act.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My name is Thomas Gigerich, 420 North Vendome Avenue, back on the bay. I have a few quick questions. I'd like to just state the questions, and you can take your time answering them however you want. Observation-wise, my home was built in 1912, so it's 100 years old. The highest water we ever had in that property was 26 inches until this storm, which went up to 42 inches. But throughout the 100 years of 26 high, we really never had any significant damage on the bay. But the discussion tonight is really about the beach. So I had a couple of questions. Has there been a comparison study done of beefing up the bulkheads versus sand dunes? And you can answer that question at your leisure. I'd just like to state these and then sit down. The other question I had is how much actual damage occurred along the beachfront? I mean, there's wind, there's water, there's tidal surge, and there's wave damage. And I just wonder how much damage has occurred along the beachfront and how much is attributed to the sand dune wave interaction. The other thing is, does the city of Margate have the opportunity going down the road to opt out of this whole project? Because one of the things that we've seen in the newspaper many, many times over the years is the hue and cry in Atlantic City that the dunes are so high that tourists are walking the boardwalk can't see the ocean. And the common feedback is that the Corps of Engineers won't let the dunes be reduced. So I don't know what the salient factors are. And the other thing is about a cut-through. Is it possible to have a cut-through, and is that the city's option, or is that the Corps of Engineers option. The last thing is Carol Arman made a comment about being here for so many years. In the 100-year history of Margate, we've actually held up pretty well in spite of probably no less than a dozen hurricanes. I saw them in the paper the other day. And I really don't know if there's been any differential with bulkheads and no bulkheads. At some point in history they were installed. I don't know whether it really made any difference. And going back to what Carol said, we've never really been trashed. And it remains for the city to say, you know, were we lucky or whatever. And I'll sit down and wait if you want to answer any of those questions.
I'll try one. The cities, and the state for that matter, will sign subsequent agreements to proceed with future replenishments. So if the city chooses not to sign on in the future, they don't have to do a particular project. That doesn't usually happen anywhere. Once the city commits, they generally like the project and see that it doesn't cause the issues that a lot of people think it will cause. So, but nobody's committed to future funding of a project. It just, we all understand that budgets are budgets. As far as the reduction of the dunes, there is the ability in state regulations now to keep the dunes at the design height that the Corps builds them at. So if you have a dune that was designed to be 12.75 and it grows to 17, if the town desires and works with the department, the dune can be kept at the design height, but you know, the more sand on a dune, ultimately, the better. It'll look more natural. We don't really like disturbing the vegetation that grows on top of the dune. That vegetation holds that dune together during storms. So it's not something we would ever encourage, but the possibility is there, and we'd like to see that used in a limited basis. Do you have answer the question?
I have a number of questions. The first question was about the comparison. And again, we've had that question a number of times tonight. And again, the federal project is one that's authorized through a detailed analysis of all options that were looked at. The beach fill is the beach fill of this size is the one that maximizes the damages prevented for the money spent. I keep saying that. That doesn't mean it's the most protective project. It just means it's the most cost-effective project for this community for the risk that occurs over the 50-year analysis period. About the dune height and AC. The dune height and AC worked. Sandy knocked down all the waves that would have hit the town. There are two areas where, in fact, you can't see over the dune. They're limited. The other areas you can see over the dune on either end, outside of the convention hall area, is the one area, and that's because the boardwalk goes down, not because the dunes are growing higher there. The actual physical boardwalk goes down in that area from the other areas. Some communities actually have vigorous, since we put the plan in place, have had vigorous planting and soon dune fencing operations to, in fact, grow their dunes to achieve more protection. Because people have mentioned it. Someone mentioned that, is the 12.75 the ultimate protection? No, it's not. So the higher and wider you can make your dunes, the more protected you are, and the more natural the dunes will look and grow and go into the future with less maintenance needed to keep them there. Dave answered the opt-out question. The cut-throughs. The cut-throughs are absolute no-no. They are what cause the extra erosion and will melt. If anyone's ever built a sandcastle on the beach, so water starts running around it, the whole thing melts, and that's what happened to the dune if you do cut-throughs. And in fact, that's what was the culprit that caused the breaches up in Maniloki. They had cut-throughs through their dune, and that was where the water went and actually gouged out the shoreline and then caused the breach there because the waves and water levels were high enough. Did I touch them all, or did I miss it?
I'd just like to add with and the terminology of cut-through is no more, it's now walk-over. The actual walkovers are also provided to any private homeowner that follows certain guidelines. They are also afforded the opportunity to build their own walkover over the dune. Over the dune. I see a follow-up, but I'll wait. And also, just to point out in Atlantic City, Dr. Farrell went out from Stockton, went out after the storm and measured Atlantic City, and the wave run-up on the dunes in Atlantic City at certain points were 12 inches from the top, 12 to 18 inches from the top of the dune. He called me from out in the field and said that design worked for Atlantic City.
Yes. My name is Connie Blank, and I live at 120 South Nassau. Scott Abbott knows the property. My house sits on the seawall. It was badly damaged. I've owned that house since 1980. Many storms. I've repaired that seawall constantly. This year, it's beyond anything that I can do. It either has to be rebuilt or reconstructed in some way. My question is, I know you want to build the dunes. I want to know what responsibility Margate has from the curb to the steps. I was told by various people that it was my responsibility. I know I have to build the seawall, but I mean, one more storm and that's it. It really needs to be addressed. And I know it's going to be 6 months to a year before you want to do this, build the dunes. I also own the property in front of my seawall. I did get an easement letter. I have 2 builders that have been quoting. I was told I need permits from Margate, State of New Jersey, and the U.S. Army Corps. That's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. And I would like to know what kind of responsibility the U.S. Army Corps, and through the city of Margate, I've been trying to get answers. I've been in touch with your engineer. I've been in touch with Scott. I need help. So I would like to have a meeting and see what they can do.
Why don't you come talk to us after this?
Okay, I've been trying. Thank you. Good. Later.
Sure. Oh, I got it.
Gray LePouillet, 3 Dolphin Drive. Really only 3 questions, 2 compound. 1, if they build the dunes, will that in any way, I hope, prevent all the cars and trucks and Jeeps and things from driving on the access on the beach through the fall and the winter and the spring and into the summer? 1. 2, you actually just sort of answered the bit about the all the beach owner, the beachfront who have steps that go, they're all washed away in the storm, we know that. They put them back, that's their access, you come over and so you can do the walkover. But the reason, this tax structure in Margate is that the closer to the beach you live, the more you pay. So if you're on the beach, you're like 30 to 40,000, cul-de-sac 18, goes back, and then it goes up again, I guess, at the bay. Without using any variation of the phrase, the benefit you'll get in protection of your house will offset the taxes you would pay by building these dunes. Since you'll be ruining views and screwing up access and all the rest, will the city be looking at rejiggering the tax structure of location of the houses? Oh, yay. Those are my questions. I'll stand here. You're not going to answer them?
That hasn't come up at any point.
So you will be essentially affecting our value again by doing this on the beachfront?
I'm not saying that it's not something that we could possibly look at, but as of yet, that hasn't been discussed.
Will it be discussed?
I don't know, possibly. I mean, I can't answer that.
How about we set a time to discuss that?
Have a week from Tuesday?
That's great. We'll bring all the beachfront people. Thank you. And the car thing?
Pardon?
The cars, the trucks, the access?
You have to be able to get the emergency vehicles over on the beach.
Emergency vehicles are fine. I mean, the fishing trucks and all that nonsense that goes screening down there, like the Margate Boulevard that happens in the winter.
That's local regulations.
Our project doesn't affect, who can be on the beach or what vehicles or anything.
Make it effective.
Sharon Simon, 424 North Thurlow Avenue. Thank you again for not only coming, but sitting here long time to answer our questions. It's a little frustrating for us as Margate residents because we have to get these, we're trying to get questions answered tonight, and our referendum language has to be approved tonight and go in tomorrow. And that's really, we feel like we have a gun to our head. And so in terms of moving this thing, I can't understand why these questions, or some of these questions, couldn't have been answered before. I know you met with the commission, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, and they had questions that were unanswered. The mayor couldn't get them answered, and we just got the answers today. And so it's really hard for us. This is a trust thing. Look, nobody knows what's going to happen, and you want us to trust us. You want us to trust you, and I want to, because I want to protect the community, whether it's that side or that side. But we don't get a lot of information, and we haven't gotten it in a timely manner. So if you could provide more timely information, I don't know why it took so long to get some of these questions answered. But the question about, that was asked by a prior person about the sand on that came onto, for Margate, it was on our beach block, and it wasn't in Ventnor, and was that because of the dunes? Didn't it have something in Margate to do with the fact, and I know the city, we talked about this earlier in our meeting, pushed the sand up against the bulkheads. They piled it up all along the bulkheads instead of the front of the scuppers, which we've done before and has been helpful. But in this case, it caused a lot of sand to go onto our beach block, which has nothing to do with you, except that it wasn't necessarily that we got the sand on there because we didn't have the dunes. It was because of that happened. So I just wanted to put that out there. The other thing is, I think we all want to protect our beaches, and we do live in Margate, and we have a whole community to protect, and I understand your point totally. It's free, we have this money, why not use it? And this is the project that you have the money to do. But it's like buying somebody a house and then saying you're in charge of the maintenance, and the maintenance is so expensive, is that you can't afford to do other things. So we as a community need to spend money, tax dollars, on our bay as well. And it isn't free. The question is, it's not going to be totally free. There are going to be costs to the Margate taxpayers, certainly. We don't know what they are, and we don't know what they're going to be in the future, and that costs us tax dollars to go up and doesn't leave us money. So, I mean, we have other communities. Other communities, what have they spent in addition to the free initial? What are some of the cost figures? We've heard Avalon is $7 million. Do you have any of those cost figures? Yes, the question is, in other communities, what have they had to pay as a municipality in addition to the free initial cost?
We do not keep that information. That's the municipalities. Some municipalities rake their beach 2-3 times a day. Other municipalities, like Avalon you mentioned, they have a vigorous program of renourishment themselves, so they are not the norm. They spend a lot more money on their town than most.
Maintenance is a result of the dune structure.
Yeah, I understand.
So maybe our commission could get that for us. That would be very helpful information. But if you could provide more timely information, it would be helpful to us.
I think a great source of that information would be Ventnor. They ask Ventnor, what they've had to spend on their maintenance.
We have asked them. We're not really happy with some of the answers, so thank you.
Terry Auerbach, 110 South Exeter and 14 South Jerome. I have one simple question. What's going to happen on November 5th if the permanent residents of Margate reject the dunes? Are we going to see you back here next year trying to convince us, or 3 years down the line? I know it was up for vote 3 years ago and the dunes were turned down. So what's going to happen next year if the people of Margate say no?
As far as I'm concerned, Terry, it's done. And I've said that before. I said that earlier. The people have a choice. If the answer in the referendum is no, then it's done. The people have spoken. If it's yes, then we will continue to gather information and move forward and at some point make a decision. But
Okay, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Adam DiBartolo, 413 North Claremont Avenue. First question is pretty simple. Most of the questions that we've asked about alternatives, I was looking through this as the meeting was going on. It's true that pretty much every question was explained in here and why it was rejected in this nice pamphlet that you handed out. Is that correct?
The ones that...
I happened to look through and see just about everyone was adequately explained. So a lot of the build a master drawing, do this, do that, they were all basically in here why they're rejected. Second question, does every town that you go to give you a warm welcoming like you got here at Margate tonight? Third question is, you're an engineer, correct? And the study and the analysis is based on science, is that correct? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Mike Cos. I live at 18 North Mansfield. Just two questions. I know it was mentioned earlier that the core study is on a website. Is it the website address that's on the brochure that we've been given?
Yes.
Okay. And then I personally am a retired engineer, and I have a hard time envisioning things that aren't in pictures. And I guess my question is, at what point, if we decide to go forward with this project, would we be able to see essentially a plan view of the beachfront and profiles off that beachfront so we can see exactly where dunes are going to be, where the new shoreline is going to be, what jetties are no longer visible, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really a date question.
Yeah, and in the report that we referenced, the feasibility report, there are conceptual, actually planned drawings at that time. And as I said, when we come to do the final design, it gets tweaked, gets formalized, and then we'll produce those. We're doing those now. That's part of that limited reevaluation study we were talking about. We're laying out the new dunes. Now, visually, if you want to look at what your dunes are going to look like, walk up to Ventnor.
Yeah, I've done
They're
that.
going to be exactly that. So that's the same height and width of the dunes. If you, not the southern end of the town, because we could only build the taper there because there's no project here. But you go towards the center of that town, and you'll see exactly which the size and height and width of the beach will be.
Great. Thank you.
Paul Mulligan, 8 South Mansfield. This is a 50-year project, correct?
The economic analysis period for this project, the authorization is for 50 years.
Is this a 50-year obligation on the behalf of Margate?
Well, the non-federal sponsor for the project is the New Jersey State, represented by the Department of Environmental Protection. That's who we sign our agreement with, and that agreement is for 50 years.
And that's what Margate would be obligated to?
40 now. 40. It's 40 now.
40?
40.
Because the project we started in Atlantic City. That's when it...
Now, so it's a 40-year obligation, contractual agreement, is that correct?
Let me explain. I think I've raised this before. There's time limits for the project. The Corps is a 50-year life cycle for the project. It can go beyond that. It's the municipalities and the state go project by project. In other words, if the Corps wants to come back in 5 years based on their measurements and says, we need to redo this beach, it's time. And let's say Margate has no money and DEP has no money, there's no obligation at that point. There just isn't. So that's what I mean by project. As the need comes around, every partner assesses what its ability is.
What you're saying then is when Margate, if Margate buys into this program, there is not a contractual agreement extending out 40 years.
And Dave, if I can add too, there's no obligation to take that nourishment. If we, as a city, determine that we don't need the sand, we just don't take it in that 3-year cycle.
Now, my
concern is, you guys obviously have some deep pockets this year through Congress. What happens when, say, the next administration says a $17 trillion deficit is nuts, we have to cut this back? Hope to God they do. What happens to the replenishment basis? Are we then still obligated as a municipality to continue building, replenishing these dunes?
No.
You put that in writing?
It is.
Is that in writing?
That was a question that I asked for, and it is here in writing.
All right. Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
My name is Flora Bluestein. I live at 9 Dolphin Drive in Margate. I have a question, I guess, for the gentleman on one side of the table, and that is, as a citizen of Margate, as a homeowner, what rights do I have personally in this process?
Profit.
What rights do I have, legal rights, do I have in this process as an individual homeowner?
Are you asking the solicitor?
I'm asking whoever can answer.
Where's your home?
9 Dolphin Drive, Margate.
So are you on the beach?
I am.
Well, we'd have to go through, do a title search and check your property. Do you happen to know if you own the riparian rights?
I don't know at the moment.
We'd have to see. If you own the beach in front of you, you would be one of the people that an easement is required from. So you might have those legal rights.
And therefore, if I have those riparian rights, I then have a legal right
Yes.
to say yes or no. Is that correct?
Well, you have a legal right to say yes or no, and then it's up to one of the arms of the government to decide the next move. The state, I believe, is contemplating coming in, possibly, and condemning all up and down the coast. That's the feel I'm getting, not just Margate. Or Margate could decide to do that.
So then my legal right to say yes or to say no, if I have those riparian rights, is not really going to be a right. Am I correct?
Well, it's called a partial taking, and the most recent case that's been in the news is Harvey Cedars, and that's where the people went to a jury award and got $375,000, and then the Supreme Court has overturned that, and it's going back to court. It's one of the great difficulties we have with these easement issues, of which we probably need 10, is what's the dollar amount, and we really can't put a figure on that today.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
I think I broke your microphone.
Oh, it is, yeah. You might be the last speaker.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I do have, yes, you did. I just have just two more follow-on questions. Basically, because I think there's a little confusion, just to clarify, the the resolution that was on the agenda for tonight is to basically just have a vote about this to let the voters decide in November. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm actually going to ask two more questions. The second question is, we heard tonight that this first phase that we would agree to in November, if this goes on the ballot, is 100% federally funded. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And my third question is, what's the downside? And that was, obviously, thank you.
Okay. Just put it down. Okay. Thank you all for your participation. We're not done yet. Okay.
My name is Ann Cherner. I'm 113 South Rumson. My property is unique in that it protrudes on the beach, and I do own the riparian rights in front of my home. What are the chances of my home being taken away?
Judge that. I can answer that for you, Ann. Zero chance of your home being taken away. A possibility that from your bulkhead out into the ocean, there would be a partial taking so that the sand dunes could be built there.
There is really no room for a sand dune in front of my home because of the way it protrudes. And I am on the list for a sand dune.
And I know your property well, but all I can tell you is there's a proposed straight line that goes in
Are you
front of your
telling me
bulkhead.
my property, my home will not be taken away?
I'm not in a position to guarantee you that, but I would think it highly unlikely.
Keith, won't the beaches be widened?
Yes, beaches will be widened.
I guarantee you your home will not be taken away.
That is not in your plan.
No,
absolutely not.
The project is formulated to protect the homes, not take them away from anybody.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you all. I especially like to thank all of you.
Mike, I have a couple of questions. Am I allowed?
Sure.
Can I ask a couple of questions? No, I'll ask them from here. Commissioner Blumberg, for those of you that don't know me, and thank everybody for coming and for staying. My one question, and a pretty important question to me, you guys keep referring to Ventnor, go to Ventnor, go look at Ventnor. Yours are going to be like Ventnor. And I've been to Ventnor, and I've gone to Ventnor, and I ride the boardwalk almost every day to Ventnor, up to Atlantic City. And I don't want to say every street, but I want to say 90% of the streets between the dunes and the bulkheads, after a rainstorm, exhibit ponding for more than 2, 3, 4 days. Some of the streets have ponding for weeks at a time. Now I'm talking about 200 feet of ponding, maybe 300 feet of ponding, maybe the length of a full street of ponding. And I'm not just talking about 1 or 2 streets. I'm talking about, and I have pictures, 90% of the streets where there are dunes in Ventnor, I see ponding for an extended period of time. What can you tell us, because you're not telling us anything about, what I think I heard you say was that where you have ponding now, you're going to have ponding in the future, and maybe we can help you. Well, what guarantee, because in Margate, we're not going to be protected by the boardwalk. When people walk onto the beach, they're going to see these dunes and they're going to be subject to this ponding. It's algae, it's mosquitoes, it's muck, and it's going to be there for a good long time. And so my question is, what guarantee do we have that we won't see that, what we're seeing now, in Ventnor?
I'm not down in Ventnor like you are all the time, but the times I've been down there, I've not observed 300 foot of ponding. But I will say that Margate and its engineering team will have the chance to review and comment on the core plans and be part of our team as far as the design goes for the Margate ponding, scuppers, bulkhead issue, where the dune lies, how we're going to deal with this. So it's going to be a cooperative effort between the core of the state and Margate to resolve that, or to come to that.
But there's at this point in time, there's no guarantee that we're not going to see that ponding at a majority of our streets. Because Ventnor's had these dunes for how many years?
And working with Ventnor all these years, they have not had an issue. They have not come to us.
Do you want me to, if you give me your email, I'll send you the pictures. I have them.
Sir, I'm not debating the pictures.
Okay.
I'm sure I could go down.
You're just saying that Ventnor hasn't complained about the ponding?
If they have a ponding issue, they've dealt with it, and it's, it happens, and I believe in the last time we met together, you told me that your street ends pond after storms now, and that was what my comment was in reference to, is that if it happens now, it'll happen again. If it doesn't happen now, it shouldn't change how the water perks into the ground.
I just, and I don't mean to be a skeptic, I can't buy into that again, because this dunes project, and if that comes with it, it's a killer for me, because we will walk over the steps, and that's what we will see when we go to the beach. They don't see it in Ventnor, and maybe that's why they don't complain, because it's more or less hidden by the boardwalk. My next question is, again, referring to Ventnor.
So you're referring that they don't look over the boardwalk?
Well, I'm
trying to understand what you're saying.
I don't want to speak for Ventnor.
I don't know.
I don't want to speak for Ventnor, but...
So you think they don't see it?
In all due respect, it's there, it's real, not to mention, again, the broken fencing, the trash, the unsightliness in front of those dunes. Now, I know that you're going to say that that's a maintenance issue for Ventnor, but maybe they don't have the money to maintain them. Hopefully, we'll have and budget the money to maintain, so that we don't exhibit these things.
But are you saying that if the project's built, it will induce more trash being left on your beach? I don't follow.
Oh, it's a fact.
I don't follow your...
It's a trap for trash.
Are you going to continue to rake your beaches or not? I don't understand.
You know, there's in the sample contract that we have from Ventnor, it says we're not allowed to rake the beaches. I'm hoping, and that was one of my next questions, are the specifics of the contract negotiable? The things that we don't like about the contract, which we haven't seen yet, we've only seen examples from Ventnor, are those specifics negotiable? Are waivers offered for language that we don't like?
I will say for the state aid agreement, if you have differing language, please propose it to the state.
So we would negotiate with the state for language that we want modified or changed.
That's what I said. Please propose it to the
Okay,
state. There's
fine.
certain
Well, again, we don't have a formal document from you guys yet.
No, I sent Scott an example of...
Right, and that's what I'm referring to. And
Just so, if I may, Commissioner, just so you guys know, I circulated the form contract that we got from Ventnor, and what the Commissioner is referring to. For instance, it says no raking, May 15 to December 15, no bulldozing. Fish and Wildlife can erect posts and strings, which prevents you from going into spots. That's what he's talking about. He's basing it off the Ventnor contract template that you guys gave me, and you know, it's a little bit different in Margate. Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
That's where we're getting that from.
I appreciate the assistance so that the people in the audience understand what some of the potential issues and liabilities are. My next question is, again...
Let's answer that one.
Thank you.
One of the requirements for all federal projects is compliance with the Federal Endangered Species Act. And piping plovers is a bird that potentially can nest on beaches. There is no known piping plover habitat anywhere on this island. There has not been any piping plovers that have established themselves in Atlantic City or Ventnor since we've widened the beaches there. Though the restrictions in raking and stuff are specific if a plover lands. They're not across the board.
They're an endangered species.
Correct. And what happens is this: we monitor the beaches. The state of New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife monitors the beaches throughout the state. If a piping plover lands, we're obligated to identify a habitat that we vent. They put up post and string.
Is that what we have in Longport on the Causeway?
Yes.
That's what we have in Longport on it. So these birds that you're talking about are less than a mile away from Margate, just so you know, where we have this area.
That's a dog beach.
But, no, towards Dog Beach, yeah. But if a piping plover landed on your beach today...
So you have the same restrictions?
I understand. We're just building newer habitat for them, but that's another point, and that really wasn't my question. My next question is related to, again, going back to Ventnor, I ride the boardwalk.
But one point needs to be made. What you were quoting isn't not in the state aid agreement. It is in the endangered species bird.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, so
I appreciate it.
So you're talking in the
It's a real, the agreement that we have is some 30 pages long, and there's some pretty complex language in it, in my opinion, and I'm a layman. My next question, please, because I don't want to keep everybody. There are dune grasses / weeds in Ventnor that are over 7 foot high. And so now maybe again, they're not complaining about them. What responsibility or what authority will we have to trim those grasses? So for when people come here and we tell them that these dunes are only going to be 1 foot above the bulkhead, or 2 feet, or whatever it is, that I think they need to understand and also hear from you the truth that those grasses can grow to 7 or 8 feet, and because that's what they are in Ventnor.
The species that were initially planted during the initial construction was not just general beach grass. There was other grasses that were thrown in there, panic grass, switchgrass, etc. That goes under lessons learned. The Corps of Engineers has now changed during renourishments that we are just planting beach grass in there. In Atlantic City and Ventnor, we did that plus, I think, one other low-lying grass that NRCS recommended. Though that type of grass will not be planted here in Margate, nor planted in Ventnor or Atlantic City again.
Your plans are for the grass to be planted on top of our dunes, if we move forward with this, lies down, it's not straight up and grows
It's
wrong.
the Cape American beach grass, which is a cultivar of the ordinary beach grass that you see that grows well here. The reason the other grasses were originally planted on the back of dunes, because that's what the plant scientists recommended for dunes to keep the dunes in place. So those higher grasses were planted from the back crest of the dune landward, because they won't exist on the front. Beach grass won't grow behind the dune because it needs the spray to thrive and grow, to stabilize your dune and to catch the sand, to stop the sand, someone mentioned it earlier, blowing up over the dune. So a healthy dune system will catch that sand to fortify the dune, to provide more protection into the future and maintain your dunes longer.
I just have 2 more questions. Does anybody from... Did I do something wrong? Do any of you guys, the press of Atlantic City reported after Sandy the rateable base loss as it related to the storm? Does anybody know the rateable base loss comparison between Ventnor, where they had dunes, and Margate, where we only had a few dunes? Did you guys look at that?
No, we don't have that information.
Okay, so I'll help you. Ventnor lost millions of dollars more in rateable base than we did in Margate. And in that regard, my question to you is, why are we, and maybe that's the next question, I've heard the figure $20 million, that this project is going to cost $20 million. It was quoted in the press today that Margate's project was $20 million. It was stated by one of the commissioners that is in fact, are we going to be spending $20 million for this project in Margate?
That was the federal government estimate that was provided to all of you in an email from myself, that the Corps of Engineers felt the estimate was $20 million.
20 million?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to spend $20 million, and the rateable base loss that we had in this 100-year storm for Margate, do you know, I'm going to tell you because you already told me you didn't know, was $800,000 on the beach blocks, on the beach block houses. We lost $800,000 in rateable base. And in that regard, why can't we do a cost-benefit analysis that we're going to spend $20 million of taxpayer money to prevent $8 million in rateable base loss?
Because you do not want to base all your future projections on the way Sandy hit here. The next storm will not hit like Sandy did. So we're planning for the storm that has not come to Absecon Island yet.
Okay, and so I understand that. And again, just so that there's no misperception, the Ventnor had dunes. They lost way more rateable base than we did in Margate, way more.
Do you have information on where that base was?
I know where it was in Margate. I don't know where it was in Ventnor. Okay, but I'm sure that if you wanted to, you could find out.
I would ask the town.
Right.
You know, I don't have that information, but I would bet it was on the bay. Also, just to finish up and explain your question, the way the projects are justified and formulated, it looks over a 50-year period of all the storms that are potential that could hit this area, hit this island, severe ones, small ones, northeasters, hurricanes, and it wraps up the damages that would occur over that 50-year period based on the best scientific information available and modeling versus do nothing. And so the plan that comes out is the one that reduces those damages over the 50 years. So as Dave said, you don't base it on one particular storm hitting, because if we were sitting here, we talked about this again. If the storm went 20 miles north,
right?
Do you want to ask the mayor of Maniloking what his rateable basis was? Do you want to ask the mayor of
I'm not a part
Holgate what his rateable
I'm not about the ifs and
ask
what
the
ifs.
mayor of Bayhead what his rateable basis.
I don't think we should be here, asking the ifs and the what ifs.
All right.
Because my questions are in fact pretty specific, and there's no, I hope that there's no generalities involved. My last question, I want to say, related to the maintenance of these dunes. If perchance, and members of the audience have asked it, the funding goes away and the project goes away, and we're hit with a storm that damages these dunes. The repair of these dunes is now on Margate. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, so there's no funding. You guys are going to hope that you can lobby Congress to come in and help Margate fix our dunes. Our beaches are unusable because we've got these big...
So you're referring to the situation that developed in Ventnor, the first project. And we came in, we made a decision that the dunes were in a precarious situation, and we allowed Ventnor to take them down because there was literally a 12-foot drop. And that's why, the southern end of Ventnor, the last 10 blocks from Buffalo Avenue to Fredericksburg, doesn't have a dune right now because we need Margate on board to stabilize the project. And that's why the southern part of Ventnor is more of a taper to reasonably end the project without Margate on board and without building a groin at Fredericksburg Avenue.
They also have no bulkheads. So in the southern end of Ventnor now, the sand is literally up against, and the beaches are tapered such that those houses from Fredericksburg to Richards have no bulkhead.
They do have bulkheads.
I'm going to tell you, in all due respect, you can step from the back porch of a majority of those houses right onto the beach.
Yes, I understand.
You live there.
I do live there, yes. And I can tell you, you live there. You're saying it the wrong way.
Oh, okay, so please educate me.
There are bulkheads there, but the sand elevation is such that it comes up to within a foot, 2 feet in some places of the top of the bulkhead. And for me, the more sand that we have there, the better.
Okay, so in a storm and a high tide, why without a bulkhead won't the water just wash right into those people's backyards?
That's not really the way. It's the elevation. It doesn't. It's not. That's not the way the water behaves during storms. It's going to chew up, just like if that was a dune. We have a lot of grass growing between the boardwalk and the bulkheads. That's higher elevation than it's ever been before. And that's great, because when the storms come and there's no sand dune at that place, that acts as a sand dune. The storm will churn away at that, and what will happen is you'll get a scarp somewhere, hopefully seaward of the boardwalk. But that elevated sand in that boardwalk to bulkhead area is basically serving as a dune. And like I said, the more sand there, the better. Yes, I do live there.
I appreciate you guys, and I thank you for your time. I don't have any more questions.
Hey, by the way, since you know I live there now, I just want to say that I went to kindergarten right here in Union Avenue School.
And probably had my mother as a teacher.
Very possibly.
One more. Are you on?
Patricia Rose, 110 South Road.
Hi, Patricia Both, 110 South Fredericksburg, which is Fredericksburg and the beach. And I had a couple comments. One is, we do have a bulkhead, but after my house, when it goes into Ventnor, there basically is no bulkhead. You can step right over, it's 2 feet. And the trash, that remaining dune that's there, which is extremely high, it's just, it does collect unbelievable amount of garbage. I'm always picking up the trash that's behind there. So if somebody's not going to be back there sweeping and picking things up, which I doubt they will, it's terrible back there. And the other thing is, you keep talking about Maniloking, but didn't Maniloking have dunes? And they got wiped out? So the dunes didn't save them.
No, they had dunes of various sizes. They've never had a big beach project like this before. A lot of the sand, the town created dunes, and I'm not even going to call them dunes, I'm going to call them piles of sand that they push up from the beach berm, which actually makes them, during a storm, a worse condition. So it's not like they did have this designed, engineered beach and berm, or dune and beach system, I'm sorry.
And between the dunes, what they did was they had cut-throughs. They basically had dunes, but at each street end, they had 12-foot cut-throughs, so when the water and waves came up, the dunes just melted.
So you're going to have this path over the top.
Right.
What we got damaged from this time was wind. It wasn't the waves. It was the wind. So what's going to stop that wood structure in a high wind from breaking apart and becoming a missile? That's going to go...
This project does nothing for wind. It's not intended or designed to stop any damage from wind.
But I'm just saying, you're going to have something that goes over the top. You're going to have wood railing.
It's not a platform. It's going to be
I-5 mix.
Yeah. Gravel.
There's no wood structure. There's no railing of any kind.
There's post and rail or sand fence, whatever the town prefers to mark, just basically to keep people from walking up and down the dunes.
So in a high wind, that becomes a missile, which is going to go right through.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that what a lot of the damage in Atlantic City was when the small piece of boardwalk that broke up? That was what caused the damage to people's houses inland, was the pieces of boardwalk,
You're
which then
referring
became...
to the inlet area where the entire pieces of boardwalk came off and
Yes,
ran
and that is what damaged people's houses. So now we're going to have pieces of wood right next to our houses, which in a high wind are going to become missiles. And they're going to cause a lot of damage. It's the wind that was causing the damage.
I do not know of any case where any of our crossovers or those timbers caused significant damage, but the damage you're referring to were whole 1,000-pound pieces of the actual old Atlantic City boardwalk slammed into homes because the floodwaters were so high. That's also part of the project that we're building, is a seawall or a bulkhead and revetment along the inlet to protect that boardwalk from future storms. So that's also part of this entire project.
I'm not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have one quick question. The last meeting we had 6-8 weeks ago, Dave, you weren't here, but we talked, somebody, I think from the state, talked about an emergency rule that was passed to allow us, or anybody or cities, to maintain the height of a dune if it grows higher.
Dave touched it. It was myself that explained that, and Dave touched it.
I don't think that was Ray. Would you mind?
Yeah. As part of an emergency rule, which is now adopted, municipalities that participate in either federal or state projects that have an engineered dune is now allowed to keep the elevation of the dune at the pumped in and pushed in elevation that the Corps has it at. If it grows higher, the municipality is allowed to remove that material and place it back within the dune structure, whether it's on the tow side or the land side. They're not allowed to truck it off to the bay or take it off site.
The question I have is, can that be written into our PCA or PPA?
I got asked that question in another municipality. It does refer to it refers to the global section of the rule. I will add that in under where it talks about the rules. I will add in the subsection that it strictly refers to.
Okay, and then my last question is, 13 years ago when I sat, well, not here, 6 blocks over with everybody, we were talking about the fishing pier, the outfall pipes, and the drainage issue.
That is correct.
And I feel like 13 years later, we don't have those answers.
And the reason was because the Corps of Engineers did not move on the design plans because Margate did not participate in the initial Beachville. We're here to talk about, we're here talking about the same subjects, but this time there is funding and possible participation.
But the fishing pier, we don't know what that would cost and who would pay for that. We still don't know.
That would be up to the Corps of Engineers. We are sitting with the fishing pier. They're going to, if the gentleman's still here to take our number, we're going to work with the fishing pier.
Okay.
Okay. Are you okay? Tom, your questions answered? Okay. Once again, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank all of you. We have some more work to do. Can you guys hang for like 5 minutes? Sure. Okay. We'll probably have about 5 minutes of business, and then we're talking. How about a hand for these guys? Eh? Thank you.
Still the vote.
All right.
You're going to have public comment on the resolution?
Go for it. Should I go? I'd like to make a motion that we approve alternate number 4, resolution, non-binding, number 162 of 2013.
I second that motion.
And I'm sorry, that was resolution number 162 of 2013, correct?
Yes, the alternative number 4.
It was number 4 earlier, correct, Scott? Okay, so we have a motion and a second?
Correct.
Roll call vote, Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Blumberg?
With comment. I guess you can't believe that after 5 hours of speaking that I could have anything more to say. I've taken exception to a lot of items tonight. After the meeting, I still have many, many, many questions. I think it close to irresponsible that the language that we're putting forth to the people in this resolution does not give them an accurate picture of what it is and what the costs are going to be and what the liabilities for the taxpayers of Margate are going to be. And in that regard, I choose to abstain.
Ms. Tarby?
Yes.
Motion for adjournment?
Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Blumberg?
Yes.
Ms. Tardy?
Yes.
All right. Can I get this one now? Yeah.
Certified one?